Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Today I'm going to do a bug pendant, and I think the one I'm doing has 8 legs, so I think it's probably an arachnid, I guess. But it's going to look kind of creepy, I hope. I picked out a couple of stones to be its abdomen and its thorax, I guess it would be. And I think they're a pretty combination. So we'll see whether you like those or not as well. Before I get started, though, I wanted to thank some groups of people. First, my patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters, and I truly, truly appreciate their support. They've developed a really nice community over there, and I really enjoy interacting with them. And I also really appreciate the financial support, because I couldn't do this without you. The other group I have are my YouTube subscribers, and I'm amazed to say that we just passed 22,000 subscribers. That's amazing. Thank you. I also couldn't do this without you guys, so I really appreciate your nice comments. It's nice to know when people tell me that I've helped them in some way, so I appreciate that. That makes me feel like I'm doing something good. And I do also appreciate the financial help, like when you get me buy me a coffees or super thanks, or if you buy my ebooks or any of my merch. All that stuff really helps with supporting my channel, so I appreciate that. Alright, well, let's get started on the creepy bug pendant. So this is one of my design idea sketchbooks. There's different varieties of them on my merch store. This particular one has a handy gauge to inch to millimeter conversion table on the back. I use this one all the time, and it's the current one I'm using to do my projects in. So the other thing I really like about them is the grid matrix in the background here. It acts as graph paper for me without being quite as in your face, and so it helps me to draw better pictures, because I'm not super good at drawings, as you're about to see. So here's what I had in mind for today. Kind of a bulbousy looking spider sort of bug. I say spider because he's got 8 legs, so I guess I could have done an insect kind of thing, but I wanted to do this particular type. And the things you should know are, from this perspective it all looks just kind of straight, but these legs are going to kind of curve up and lay back down, so they give it more of a three-dimensional aspect. And I'm going to try and do little notches at the ends of these wires, and I may shape the legs a little bit to make them look more realistic, but I'm not sure. I haven't decided on whether I'm going to do kind of abstract-y or more realistic on this one. I did a bumblebee pendant a while back. That's one of my favorite bugs I ever did, and I'll put a link up there if you're interested in seeing it. I did more segmented looking legs, and that looks pretty cool. I thought that turned out nicely, so we'll see. I'll kind of along the way I'll make that decision. So those are going to be 16 gauge round wire, which is 1.3 millimeters. These are probably 18 gauge, which is 1 millimeter, and the rest of it is primarily going to be bezel. I did this bezel in advance just to save time, and we'll do this bezel for this stone here. They're both step bezels. On this one I used some flattened 14 gauge like I used on my last project, I believe. I had a little bit left over, so I just used that to raise the stone up a little bit and to give it a transparent background. This one is a faceted stone, and so we'll need to have a step on it anyway. You generally set faceted stones open back if you can, and that allows more light to get to it. I picked some sort of garish stones because it's going to be a bug. Where did my little grabber go? There it is. I have, for the body, I have this Mystic Topaz, which, if you don't know, is topaz that's been coated with a titanium coating, and it gives it that iridescence. So I always thought it looked a little bit like carnival glass to me, honestly. And I think it's perfect for a bug. So that's going to be our, I guess it's the body or abdomen. I picked out a kind of a pretty pink tourmaline. This one's not so garish, but I thought we'd make his head or his forward thorax body. I don't know my entomology terms very well, I don't think. So whether it's his head or if it's his thorax, I don't really care. We're going to use this little pink tourmaline. That's about 6 millimeters. This one was a 10 by 12. So, probably what we'll do is we'll make this bezel first, and then we'll start making the legs, and then we will solder those things together. I'll probably do a couple of little silver balls. I should do 8 little silver balls if I was doing a spider, although that'd be hard to get them arranged on there in a nice way. But that'd be cool, so if anybody ever does that, send me a picture. So I'll do a couple of little balls there, and then we'll put a hidden bail on the back, just a couple of loops on the backs of these legs, I think, so we can run a little chain through them. So that's my plan. So let's get started by making a bezel here. I normally would probably use, this is the tallest bezel I have, it's 1/4 inch, which is I think 6.35. Normally I use 26 gauge bezel. This is the only stuff that I had that tall though today, and I needed it kind of tall for this particular one, unless I wanted to do some fancy kind of step building of a body base. And I didn't really feel like doing that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and use this. It's a little thinner than I'd like, but it'll work just fine. So we're going to create a bezel for this out of this. Bezel for this out of this. For this. In this way. Thusly. Alright. So let's file this flat. Usually keep this stuff around for setting thick beads, like side drilled stone beads can sometimes be very pretty. Or any other kind of thick object that you need to set. But it'll work for today. I would order some more, except silver is at 36 something an ounce, which is crazy. If you haven't been to my channel before, I use primarily hard silver sheet solder, although I occasionally use a little paste solder at various temperatures. I use a liquid flux that I dribble on with a dropper bottle. And my torch is a Silversmith model. It's their acetylene air torch. It pulls in atmospheric air through the little hole, mixes it with the acetylene to produce a hotter flame. It's not as hot as oxyacetylene because they're not pumping pure oxygen into the flame, which really makes it burn hot. But it's hotter than a propane torch, and so it's really great for silver. I really like it a lot. And I use the #1 tip for almost everything. So I already have a little bit of that solder right there, so I'm just going to use that. So about half of my views in my little analytics show that about 50% of my views are from people who aren't subscribed, which always blows me away. Why haven't you subscribed yet? I have regular videos showing all sorts of different fun stuff. So if you're into the metalsmithing scene, is there a metalsmithing scene? Alright, let's get this reshaped. I found a little piece of flattened 12 gauge square that I thought might be long enough to do this for the inside step on this thing. I thought that might be good because it's a little bit tall, and normally I do wire and then I do a couple of layers of it, or 3 layers in the case of a really deep stone, but I thought I'd use a piece of this stuff that was laying around still. This has got a checkerboard top, so it's hard to get it to sit flat on the table when you're checking the size of your bezel here. I think we're kind of looking about right. We'll just have to get it, once we have a lip in there, it'll be easier to get it to sit flat. So let's create a lip to put in there. Here's that piece of flattened 12 gauge square. So it's a little bit taller, a little bit thinner. And I looked at it compared to the stone and it looked like it was enough to do for this. So we'll get it to where it is about the right size, and we'll cut it off and slide it in there and solder it in. It would be easier to get it closer to the size if we twist it just a little so I can overlap them. Let me straighten it back out. We're getting in the ballpark now. I think just a skosh tighter this way. I think that's going to be pretty close. Only one way to find out for sure. Oops. Whenever something like that happens where it slips off, that usually means I'm not relaxing and filing and letting the file do the work. I'm trying to force it. So, well, let's solder that together and then see how it looks. So we're going to push it past itself just a little bit. Get those lined up. Doesn't have to be exactly the right shape at this stage. Just want to make sure the seams line up nice. I want to solder it. So one of the things that I do pretty frequently is I pick solder. And to do that, you melt a little bit of solder onto the end of one of these titanium or tungsten picks. This one's titanium. And you heat your piece up to the correct soldering temperature and then touch it where you want it to go, and it just jumps on there. If you have timed it right and you got the temperature just about right, it's a really useful way to be able to put solder in real precise places. And so when I learned how to do it, it really made a big difference for me. So if you're interested, I have a video about it up there. You should check it out. I think it's a good thing to learn. It allowed me to be able to do a lot of things that I hadn't been able to do prior to that. If that makes any sense. Being limited to just kind of placing a piece of solder on something. We're pretty close on both shape and size. It's a little bit longer, elongated than this one. This is kind of a short and stumpy sort of oval. But let's go ahead and file the edge just a little bit to smooth it out and reduce the size just a tiny bit. There we go, that's pretty tight. Let's see if we can squeeze it in there. Whoops. Got a little too overzealous there, pinching. Pinchy, pinchy. Okay, let me cut a little more solder. My solder piece is getting a little small here. Okay, so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to flux it, and then we'll set these all kind of, or not all of them, but a few of them. Get off there. So we'll get this flux, then we'll set it right on top of those, and then we can heat it till they flow up in there. So I can't believe I passed 22,000 subscribers. That's awesome. Only 78,000 more until I get one of those little plaques. So tell your friends. That should work. Again, when we get towards the end, I'll file this bezel down until it's just right above the girdle of the stone, which is the widest part of the stone, so that we can get a grab on it. But yeah, that will be sparkly. Okay, so let's think about this. This is my thinking here. I think I'm going to solder these two in between this part and this part, and then I'll add in these other four as separate pieces, or solder these ones on kind of underneath, because they're all clustered in kind of a tight area. But I do want these to be able to go upwards a little bit on both of them. So we're going to cut these a little bit longer than I have them drawn here, so that we can make it more three-dimensional. I think once we get all those soldered together, we'll have to do at least the shaping for these two to get them where their final shape is going to be, because I was thinking I would solder them to the edge of the bezel down here to make it strong. And then these other ones, we can leave them straight until we get it all polished, and then bend them into whatever configuration we want. But these ones I think we have to leave the same, or leave them in the shape that they're eventually going to be, if that makes sense. And then we'll add the little eyes or whatever, and the little spiky mandibles, I guess. Again, not an entomologist. Okay, so let me find some 16 gauge. I had a little bit. I may have to make some more, because I don't generally. I buy 14 gauge, and I usually make it into 16 when I need it, so I may have to go pull some. So I'm thinking I don't want to have too little, so I'd rather have to cut a little bit off than have to pull the whole piece off and cut a longer piece and then do that. That'd be kind of a pain. So for these two right here, I definitely have enough. I think I'm going to be just short unless I can find another piece. So let's get these soldered together. I think we need to find the center of these two, solder them together kind of in the center. And then I may file just a little bit in on either side to match the curves of these, and we'll solder those on there. And then I'll go off camera and make a little bit more of this wire, and we'll add the other legs. So get these straight. There it is. I think I want them to be together for a little ways, not a huge long ways, before they separate. Kind of like that, down in the jaws a little ways so it'll bend. There. Kind of like that. Does it have to be perfect? Probably not. We're going to solder those two together, I think. First, let's do that. I'm thinking like that. So we do just a little bit of a indent with our half round file. You can brace this against something if you need to. Let's do that one first, and then I'll probably sweat a little bit of solder on the inside of this one here, and then let's make sure it fits in there nice. Yeah, sure. It'll probably sweat a little bit on there, so it's already where it needs to be. Sweat soldering is where you pre-melt some solder into a place where you want it to be, and then reposition your pieces, and then reflow the solder so it melts again. No, let's put a little bit on there like I said. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to go make a little bit more of the 16 gauge. I'll be right back. Okay, so I broke out the softer pad, which is a fiber kiln block, and I cut a couple of pieces. This one's a little bit longer than these. This one's about the same length as those other ones. I just put a little bit extra in the rear ones because it looks like they're going to have to be a little bit longer, I think. So this allows me to solder them kind of to the back like that. I made the curves go out far enough to where it's unlikely they'll solder to the bezel so much. This one I might have to do a little bit further. I think that's a little better. There's a pretty big hunk of solder here, so I want it to. We might get it all in one go, but the thing that's challenging here is these wires on top are easier to get hot, but the part that's pushed into the pad is kind of insulated from the heat. And so be careful not to melt the wires while you're trying to get this other piece up to temperature. You want them both to see how that wire is going to look. Sketchy. That's the disadvantage to sticking stuff into an insulating. Because with silver, you got to get it all up to the right temperature. I think right now would be an appropriate time to just go ahead and solder on those little balls and those antennas. I think that's all we have to do. Let's see if that comes out to be kind of in the size range. Sure. I can work with that. So I think I'm just going to put a jump ring here and a jump ring there, or maybe kind of a U-shaped piece. If you're new to this, it might be easier if you use a different kind of solder than just hard silver solder for this stage. Either way works. Let's make sure I got some decent solder joints there. This basic bug idea would work for a lot of different kinds of bugs. You could kind of emulate more of a stylized, kind of cartoonish bug on this one, but so the chain will go right through there. Probably have to use kind of a delicate chain on this one. But, let's see, let's cut these off a little bit shorter. So we'll get that all cleaned up and pickled and polished, and then I'll show you at least cutting one of these things, but I'll probably do it after I shape the legs, you know. So we'll be back. Okay, I did some cutting and I did some polishing and everything. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some notches right in the ends of these little feet. Just I'm going to try to get it to start where I want it to. I want to use one of these slots. I think it needs to go too far. I'm going to spread those open a little bit with a knife blade and then file the ends just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead, I kind of popped it in there. I did this one completely, but I'll still need to clean it up with the Dremel. This one, I pinched it in there so it's not going to move too much. And then we can start doing the setting portion. I do this a little differently than some. I use my flat part of my chain nose pliers here as a bezel pusher. Then I use the rounded part of the chain nose here to kind of burnish it, which is where you rub that top edge, smooth it out. You can play with the configuration of the legs and stuff, but that's kind of what I was shooting for. I'll get these lined up nice for a chain, and I'll clean up the tops of the bezels with my rotary tool using a blue silicone abrasive wheel, which is kind of the fine grit, so that'll get that cleaned up a little bit. You gotta be careful not to hit the coating on this thing, otherwise it'll take part of that coating off probably. A couple of critiques that I would give myself. I forgot to solder these to the base, but I think that's okay. I'm just going to run with it. But other than that, I think it turned out okay. So I gave myself a B- on that one. But I like it still. So I think someone will love it, especially that big sparkly carnival glass looking stone. But I think it'll be a fun piece. So tell me what you think. Tell me about different kinds of bugs that you've made before, if you've done that. I'd love to hear what your kind of choices about those sorts of things are. But this is a good way to do a general kind of bug. You could do 6 legs for an insect or 8 legs for an arachnid. You could configure the legs differently. You could probably add some wings if you want to do some sort of flying insect. But there's a lot of different variations you could do. So I think it's a cute, fun idea. So give it a try. If you enjoyed that, make sure to hit the like button before you go. And I'd love it if you'd take a moment and visit my main channel page. I have over 500 videos now. I've been doing 3 per week for about 3.5 years. And so there's quite a bit of content there, and I think there's almost certainly something else that you'll find useful or entertaining. And I'd love it if you also subscribe to my channel. Finally, in the video description down below, there's some important links. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks that I showed you at the beginning. Or there's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that community, which is a great artistic group over there. And there's a link to buy my ebooks if you want to get yourself one of those. It's a great guide to all of the videos I did in a particular year. There's one for 2023 and one for 2024. If you buy them both at the same time, it gets you a $5 off discount. So it's a great way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips, and a nice way to support my channel. So I really appreciate it if you do that. All right, well, thanks for watching today. Take care. Happy silversmithing.